$100,000 if they could solve the issue.
Já jsem to vyřešil, kurva, říkám, prostě je přestěhujte do nějakého bunkru vojenského, tam jim dejte, vole, tam jim udělejte kancelář, tam je nikdo nenajde, dejte jim nový IP adresy, vole, zamkněte ty IP adresy do 50 trezorů, vole, nevím, nějakých virtuálních kondomů, nebo jak se tomu říká, kurva, a hotový. Nic koukneme se ještě na T1 DDOS drama, je horší, než jsme si mysleli. Oni dostávali už minulý rok DDoS teda, a proto měli ten rok tak špatný T1, protože prostě DDoSovali, vole. Oni s tím mají asi problém až doteď, což je jako smutný, že nejlepší tým na světě, vole, nemůže trénovat třeba kvůli tomu, že je nějaký blbý DDoSuje, no. Nebo asi jich je víc, jo, to asi nebude jeden, ale. Co je DDoS? Ti prostě zhazuje internet na dálku, tak něco.
10 months, T1, the League of Legends World Champions, have been getting attacked.
플레이오프를 준비하는 과정에서 다른 팀들은 연습을 할 수 있는데
Nemohli jsme trénovat solo queue, tak jako ostatní týmy.
에 반해서 저희는 솔로 랭크 연습을 하지 못하기 때문에
They can't practice, they can't stream, and they've lost out on millions of dollars because of it.
Kvůli tomu ztratili hodně, no. T1, že jo, má v Koreji jako obrovský mrakodrap. A tam prostě mají jako, tam mají doslova jako kanceláře T1 a tam jako trénuje prostě Fakera a ten jeho tým, že jo. A asi tu budovu celou jako nějak v DDoSu, nebo já nevím, no. Musíme mít asi nějaký, vole, tajný bunkr někde v podzemí a tam budou trénovat, no. Nebo já nevím, nějak na tajném místě asi, nebo co. Nevím.
Now, Riot are offering a
Nebo aspoň myslím, že to tak je teda, jo.
$100,000 bounty for anyone who can fix the problem for them. But the question is, why? For the last year, I've been trying to wrap my head around it all. I released a video about it, and then afterwards, the creator of the DDoS tool hunted me down on Discord to chat. So what's going on, and why are T1 the only team being targeted? It's time to
Taky nechápu, proč targetují jenom T1.
investigate. So this all started a year ago, but how did...
Začalo to před rokem, no, potom co vyhráli Worlds, tak hnedka ta další sezóna, jakoby, tak u začátku vlastně je nějak furt co, no, posílit ty DDoSy.
How do these attacks even work? Imagine you're standing in front of a vault. As far as you can tell, it's impenetrable. Inside of this vault is an IP address. It's sort of like your home address, except it's the digital address for your internet connection. Finding this address is typically the hardest part of a DDoS attack. Not only because most of the time they're pretty well guarded, but also because they're dynamic. This means that every week or so, they'll rotate to a new address. Even if you broke into the vault last week, you'll have to break into it again this week. However, if an entire team is sharing this one IP address, it introduces a tempting vector of attack no matter how difficult it may be. So let's assume that Riot Korea has patched all the flaws in their client and that no one in T1 has had their system compromised in any way. What would the next step be for a hacker who wanted to break into the vault? The one constant variable that all the team members of T1 share is that they all play, stream, and scrim at T1 headquarters in Gangnam, South Korea.
No, T1 headquarters, což je ten mrakodrap, jak jsem řekl, no, ta obrovská budova prostě. Takže možná proto jsou tak lehce targetnutelní, nevím.
Korea. This makes things a little bit easier for an attacker because they only need to find one IP address. The prevailing theory is that the anti-cheat specific to the Korean
Říkám, oni musí prostě postavit nějaký vojenský podzemní bunkr, kde je prostě nenajdou, aby je nemohli DDoSovat.
server had a vulnerability that could be exploited. But as we'll come to learn, that might not be the case. Once the attacker discovered the IP address, they had everything they needed to not just attack one player, but the entire T1 infrastructure. Given that this has been an unrelenting problem for the last year, the dedication of whoever's behind this seems clear, although the motivation, not so much. But there was a tweet from Riot Medler, the head of League of Legends, where he stated, "We've been working with T1 for months now, and we've addressed a number of issues that have resulted in prior attacks on their HQ. These recent incidents, however, are different from those earlier attacks, and as a result are not addressed by the fixes that we put in place. Since these latest attacks started, we've had a team investigating what's causing these latest problems, and we're in ongoing discussion with T1 on other ways to mitigate these attacks. The upgrades put in place made it so that T1 themselves couldn't be attacked anymore. That is, at least directly. But a new method wasted no time in showing itself, and the fix raised more questions than it answered. Why are T1 the only team affected? And why are Riot offering a $100,000 bounty for anyone who discovers a vulnerability that specifically leads to DDoSing? And why have Riot Korea allegedly said they don't want the DDoSing tool shut down at all? So how does this mysterious tool work? Through a fair bit of research and articles that were only originally published in Korean, we can pinpoint it down to a couple of things. There was, at least at some point, a vulnerability in League's code. This vulnerability allowed a player's IP address to be discovered purely based off their summoner name. What?
Jako za celou historii lolka bylo pár exploitů, který jakoby, skrz který jako mohl nějak DDoSnout ostatní hráče třeba, jo. Že jeden člověk DDoSnul ostatních jako 9 hráčů nebo enemy 5 hráčů a takové věci. Myslím, že se to možná i zažil jednou, nevím. Nejsem si ale jistý úplně. Vím, že jsem jakoby hrál v době, kdy se to dělo. Dělo se to jako několikrát, ale už si to moc nepamatuju teda, no. Bych pravdu řekl, ale dělo se to teda, no.
What's more, this attack only seemed to affect people playing on the Korean servers. We could see this when a Korean streamer who was being DDoSed, Kim Min Kyo, switched to the Chinese server temporarily and it fixed all of his problems. The only visible difference between the Korean League client and the rest of the world is that they had their own separate anti-cheat called Demacia. It seems possible that when League's source code was stolen, it exposed a weakness to be exploited, especially given that when Demacia flagged someone as a possible cheater, this was the information that was sent off. The current date, the player's username, the suspected hack tool, and their IP address. All of this information was sent off to Riot. This exploit was then made into a tool called SwissKnife. People could pay SwissKnife to pull an IP of whoever they wanted, and the entire thing was all run out of an extremely secure Discord server. We'll go more into this later, but just remember it for now because it will be important. Once this IP address is located, a network of compromised computers is used to send a flood of traffic to the victim. This is more commonly referred to as a botnet. Creating your own botnet is hard, so the more common option is to just buy one. They typically start at around $99. You might be thinking, $99 is pretty expensive. In fact, it's 99 times more expensive than my Patreon for comparison. Except when you sign up to my Patreon, you get early access to these videos without ads and you get your name personally thanked at the end of each upload. Plus you get to know that you personally are what's allowing me to continue creating this content for you. So if you enjoy my videos and you want to support future videos, the link is in the description. So all of this seemingly explains why the exploit is only affecting the Korean server, but then something happened that really threw me off track. The entire T1 roster got DDoSed.
Takže s korejským serverem bylo prostě něco špatně, co odhalilo ty IP adresy, jo. Chápu správně?
Again, but this time they weren't in Korea. Later, Faker mentioned this incident in an interview.
이번에
This time around we are required to play 10 normal games in order.
그래서 노멀 게임 10판 안 하면 랭크를 못 하더라고요. 그래서 네.
So I have yet to play and I think one game.
하고 있는데 뭐 패배했던 거는 인터넷이 끊.
Prostě jim spadl internet, takže prohráli hru.
그래서 패배했던 것 같습니다.
It's unknown at this point
Ale co to bylo s těma 10 normálkama?
whether or not this is connected to the rest
Nebo jako myslel asi jako zápasy vole v LEC? V LCK takhle?
of the attacks, but it does seem unlikely given how every other incident has been confined to the Korean server. It's not completely disproven, but it is just something to keep in the back of your mind for now. But then, after ignoring the problem for most of the year, Riot started offering people $100,000 if they could solve the issue.
Já jsem to vyřešil, kurva, říkám, prostě je přestěhujte do nějakého bunkru vojenského, tam jim dejte, vole, tam jim udělejte kancelář, tam je nikdo nenajde, dejte jim nový IP adresy, vole, zamkněte ty IP adresy do 50 trezorů, vole, nevím, nějakých virtuálních kondomů, nebo jak se tomu říká, kurva, a hotový. Dolarů. What?
Imagine yourself in the hacker's shoes. You've just found a zero-day exploit. A zero-day exploit or a zero-day vulnerability is an unknown exploit in the wild that exposes a vulnerability in a software or hardware, and it can create complicated problems well before anyone realizes anything's wrong. A zero-day exploit leaves no opportunity for detection when it's used, which is exactly where it gets its name from. You have a couple of options. You can turn this into the company and they can fix it. Or you could try your hand at the black market and make millions. Well, potentially, you could also just go to jail. This left companies with a bit of an issue. If someone found an exploit in a program or a company's code, they had no reason to turn it in. So they came up with a solution. This led to the introduction of bug bounties. Companies began to offer large amounts of money for anyone who could turn in an exploit. If you're
$20,000 za to, že jim oznámíš exploit. Jo, to jsou jakoby závažnost těch exploitů. Significant data breach, system compromise, significant data leak or severe operational disruption. Prostě exploity, kterým asi hodně zavařejí to. Minor vulnerabilities. OK. Čete, si přijete nějaký exploit, tak můžete vydělat. Pojď na to.
In an exploit. If you were a hacker, this was an opportunity to switch sides, turn in your findings to the company, and make some money while you're at it. Plus, you get to live out the rest of your life without constantly looking over your shoulder. Nearly a year after T1 got hit off.
Tak jo, no, když exploit takhle jako využiješ a prodáš ho na černém trhu, tak asi máš pak jako strach, že jako na tebe přijdou ty vole. To asi nebude jako když prostě ukradneš vole sneakersku vole v krámu.
Offline for the first time, Riot started offering one of these bounties. This is a website called HackerOne. It's one of the main platforms that bounty
A
hunters
tak někteří lidi třeba nemají svědomí, že? Tak jim to asi nevadí, vole, nevím.
will go to find new jobs. And for some people, it really is a full-time job. If you discover a flaw in the defenses of a big company, they'll reward you handsomely. For example, this is Riot's pay.
Jako jo, no, asi tam dávali 30 000 dolarů za nějaký závažný exploit, tak se tím třeba může i někdo živit, no, to je pravda.
Page on HackerOne.
Takže každý 3 měsíce přijde nějaký exploit, víš co? Důležitý, proč ne, že?
They've just added 3 new bounty opportunities, all of them related to DDoS.
Myslím, že to dělali nějací Indové, aby pak mohli sáhnout proti nim, ale tak oni jim DDoSovali prostě i solo queue, vole, chápeš?
DDoSing. Non-traffic volume-based denial of service, DDoS that can identify and target individual players, and targeted...
A proč by DDoSovali jenom je? Proto by měli DDoSovat jako víc zápasů, ne? Nebo i zápasy jiných jako týmů. Proč by to dělali cíleně jenom T1? Víš, jako kdyby chtěli ovlivňovat sázky, tak si říkám, proč by to bylo jenom u T1? To by museli jako u více, ne?
In-game session disconnection. These all
To proč by byli tak blbí, že by to dělali jenom u jednoho týmu, kdyby to bylo kvůli sázkám? Mně přijde, že to bylo z nějaké jako nenávisti spíš, no, když to bylo vyloženě jenom na ně a nikdy na nikoho jiného.
their own individual examples, as you can see here, and rewards that go all the way up.
Telekomunikační společnost, jakože konkurence jako SK Telecom T1, jako třeba T-Mobile, jo, že nějak DDoSoval, nebo Vodafone, no. Nevím, co je v Koreji za tyhle společnosti, ale to mi taky přijde divný, jako jaký to na to má vliv, víš, jako, že DDoSují jejich e-sport tým, jiná telekomunikační společnost, jako je to zajímavý nápad, to mě nenapadlo, ale... nevím.
Up to $100,000. So what does this mean? And is $100,000 enough to fix an issue of this magnitude? Let's put things into perspective here. There was a developer who single-handedly managed to reduce the GTA Online loading time from an average of between 3 to 10 minutes to under 2 minutes. This was a really big problem for the game at the time. And for his work, Rockstar awarded him with $10,000. For a big company that's outside of the gaming space, like PayPal, for example, the average payout is between $1,000 and $3,000, with the most critical exploits receiving between $20,000 and $30,000. So yeah, this is a really big bounty. But the very fact that Riot created this bounty raises some really interesting questions. Everything we know about this DDoSing tool, SwissKnife, has come from screenshots and leaked information posted on Korean forums. There was a name that kept popping up, and before I released my last video, I tried to add them on Discord to see if we could get a comment. Obviously, if you've watched the last video on this topic that I did, then you would probably know that we didn't end up getting a comment before the video came out. But shortly after I released that video, someone within their team contacted me. Before I dive into that though, I need to make something clear. It's important that when we're talking about sensitive situations like this, that everything just remains a theory until there is some sort of hard proof. Because right now...
Ten outplay od toho Zeuse na Volts, to bylo insane, no. To mi teďka připomenulo, no.
No one can really be 100% sure of what's going on apart from T1 and maybe Riot, and probably not even them because the issue isn't fixed yet. So this raises the question, what's the reason for someone reaching out from their team? They could have ulterior motives or some other way to benefit from the information that they share with me, and it could not even be true. Especially given that whoever the attacker is seems to enjoy making Riot look a bit silly. Here's part of the message that I got sent. Quote, we had already been in contact with a Riot employee. We intended our service to be used by our users in their own games, not against streamers or pros. We offered to shut down the API if they desired, but they declined. Later on, they tried to sneak into our service, so we stopped talking and blocked them.
Tohle je zpráva od těch jako DDoSerů, nebo co? Že jim nabízeli, že to shutdownou ty DDoSy, nebo jak?
We offered to shut down the API if they desired, but they declined. Ale
Riot to odmítnul jako.
Later on.
A pak se jim tam snažili do toho jako dostat nějak.
They tried to sneak into our service.
Takže to poslal Riot?
So we stopped talking and blocked them. So what does all of this mean? If this is true, then there's a chance that the people carrying out the DDoSes now are not even the same people that started them initially. There is one more part of this to cover though. The majority of these DDoS attacks took place before the introduction of Vanguard. This is back when nearly every single major streamer was getting attacked, even the LCK got hit offline, and no one on T1 could stream at all. Flash forward to the present day though, after the implementation of Vanguard, there still seems to be a way to exploit the client to find IP addresses. But the only team being affected now is T1. This lines up with the other part of the message I received, where the creator states that Demacia had already been disabled in the lead up to Vanguard's release, meaning that the exploit most likely has nothing to do with it, contrary to leaks and prevailing opinion on Korean forums. Less than a week after Riot started offering this $100,000 bounty, the new T1 top laner, Doran, got DDoSed.
와 심하네.
This began straight away after he joined T1 in late November. Doran himself wasn't being directly targeted. Instead, it was his teammates, as had mostly been the case since T1 upped their defenses. Despite everything, it looks like T1 are going to try to brute force their way through the attacks and just stream regardless, which is understandable given how much money they lost by not being able to stream for most of 2024. Esports team...
Tak určitě v nějakých smlouvách, že musí streamovat a podobně, že jo? A ty streamy jsou taky spojený s nějakýma sponzorama a teda a oni jak nemůžou, vole, nemají prostě internet, tak nemají, vole, najednou nic, no. To je na píču, no.
Already have a hard enough time becoming profitable, and T1 were actually projected to turn a profit for 2024. That is, at least until the attacks started. T1 has stated that now they've made upgrades to their facility, which protects them from being DDoSed. An upgrade like this can sometimes be as simple as increasing the capacity of your internet. Here's an example of how Riot does it with their own servers. Here's the actual data of when the Riot servers were victims of a DDoS attack. Instead of the main server taking the full amount of force, it's evenly spread throughout all of their servers, allowing it to be effectively soaked. But back to T1 for a second.
Even with all the DDoS stuff, where we lost a ton of money because I prioritized not having their mental boom because of not being able to stream. Super frustrating that we're the only team targeted in this. LCK and Riot are like, well, like, they can't stream.
Furt tak ho nechápu, proč jenom oni, vole, proč zrovna oni? Teď prostě jakoby má každý rád, ne, přijde, nebo já nevím, já neznám jako žádnýho, nepamatuji si tam žádnýho hejtera, prostě T1, jakoby, já ani nejde nemít rád, víš co, nebo, já nevím, no.
So like all that streaming income that they lost out on because of the inability to solve DDoS, and here we are in December, you know?
Yeah, still same problem.
Still sitting here like, hey, when's DDoS gonna be solved? Yeah, great question.
Was that
hopefully someone like wins the bounty.
Interestingly enough, the Korean government is actually starting to crack down on cyber attacks since they've seen a big uptick around the country in the past year. On November 28, the South Korean police arrested the CEO and 5 employees for manufacturing over 240,000...
Ale zase, ale proč by to byly jenom T1, kdyby to dělala Čína? A v Číně se to nedělo jako vůbec. To je Korea jediná, ne? Jestli jsem to pochopil správně, tak jenom v Koreji se to děje.
Satellite receivers, preloaded to include DDoS attack functionality at a purchaser's request. This functionality was allegedly needed because one of their competitors was DDoSing them, and they wanted to counter it. Given the recent developments in this case, perhaps a solve is on the horizon. However, it's hard to ignore the disheartening truth that if an entire team of professionals at Riot Korea can't solve it with all of their resources and intel, how can someone from the community without any of that hope to stand a chance? Hopefully, for the sake of T1, someone can solve the mystery and bring home the bounty. But maybe the attacks won't stop, and they'll have to make yet another miracle run against all odds if they want to win Worlds in 2025.
Jako jo, no, kam už ten rok, jako, jak všechno bylo proti ním, jak celý minulý rok dostávali DDoS a skončili na Worldse, dostali z posledního postupového místa, jo, ze 4., že jo. Totální outsideri a stejně prostě to vyhráli celý, no. To jako všechno bylo proti ním, vole, a furt se to děje, no. No já nevím, no, tak třeba se to brzo dozvíme, co zatím stojí, ale jestli jako, vole, Riot a nevím kdo všechno, že jo, zatím proti tomu může bojovat a zatím s tím nic neudělali, vole, tak to jako, z čeho můžou být tady schopní ty lidi, že? Čauši, jdu. Pa.